The day I signed those papers, I wore my mother's pearl earrings. I don't know why I'm telling you that first, but when I look back now, that detail matters to me. Those earrings were the only thing she left me that had any real value, not sentimental value, actual dollar value, and I wore them to the closing like some kind of talisman, like I needed her with me in that conference room. 41 years! That's how long I spent building Hartwell Home Health, from a folding table in my spare bedroom in Dayton, Ohio, to a regional care network with 11 locations and over 300 employees. I started it the year my youngest started kindergarten, back when people still used paper files and nobody had heard of Medicare billing software. I learned everything the hard way. Payroll mistakes that kept me up until 3 a.m. An insurance audit in 2004 that nearly broke me. A lawsuit in 2009 that I won but just barely, and my hair went gray that winter. My husband, we'd been married 32 years at that point, he always said the business was my little project. He said it affectionately, I think. At least that's how I chose to hear it. The final sale price was $6.8 million. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because it matters to what happened next. The buyers were a private equity group out of Columbus. Professional, polished, the kind of men who wear watches that cost more than my first car. We'd been in negotiations for almost 8 months. My attorney, a sharp woman named Priscilla who wore reading glasses on a chain and did not tolerate nonsense, had fought hard for every clause. The day we finally got to the table, I remember the pen felt heavier than it should have. When it was done, I walked out onto 5th Street and just stood there for a minute. Traffic going past. A woman walking a dog. A college kid on a skateboard. Everything completely ordinary. And I had just changed my life completely, and no one around me had any idea. I called my husband from the sidewalk, straight to voicemail. I texted him, "It's done. Call me when you can." He didn't call back for 4 hours. That should have told me something. It told me nothing. We'd been living slightly separate lives for a while. He had his routines and I had mine, and that's what 32 years looks like sometimes, or so I told myself. He was a regional director for a commercial property company. Good job, comfortable income, plenty of travel. He golfed on weekends. I worked. That was our rhythm. The 4-hour delay he explained as a back-to-back meeting situation. I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? I had no reason not to. That night at dinner, I told him about the closing. The number, all of it. He got very quiet in a way I hadn't seen before. Then he said, "Wow, that's significant." And he poured himself another glass of wine. I remember thinking, this is not the reaction I imagined for 30 years. But I pushed past it. I told myself he was processing. I told myself I was tired and reading too much into things. I told myself a lot of things that year. It was a Tuesday in March when I found out. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that because it matters to me. I have never been the kind of woman who goes through someone's phone. I believe in privacy. I believe in trust. Maybe that was my problem. He'd left his jacket on the kitchen chair, the blue one, his work jacket, the one he wore to the office most days. It was blocking the doorway, and I moved it to hang it up. His phone slid out of the pocket and fell on the tile floor, face up. The screen lit. I wasn't trying to read it, but the preview was right there. And the name wasn't a name, it was a heart emoji, just a heart. And the message underneath said, "Miss you already. Last night was everything." I stood in my kitchen for a long time. I'm 63 years old. I have buried my parents. I have sat with patients to their final hours. Because for the first decade of Hartwell, before we grew, I did home visits myself. I know what it feels like when the ground shifts under you. I know the particular silence of a room where something has changed. I set his phone on the counter, face down. I hung up his jacket, I started the coffee maker, and I did not say a single word. I'm not entirely sure how I functioned for the next 72 hours. I went through motions, I made dinner, I asked about his day. I slept in the same bed. I don't remember sleeping, actually. I think I just lay there while he breathed beside me, completely at ease, completely unknowing that I knew. The third night, after he was asleep, I got up and sat in my car in the driveway for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I want to be honest. Eventually I cried, plenty, but not that night. That night, I just sat with it. The cold in the car, the neighbor's porch light, the way the street looked at 2 a.m. when everyone else is inside. I thought about the 41 years of Hartwell. Every time I'd chosen the business over a vacation, every board meeting I'd taken alone, every Saturday morning I'd spent on the phone with a supervisor instead of in bed. I thought about how I used to feel guilty about that, how I used to apologize for my ambition, and I thought, he had a heart emoji in his phone. I called Priscilla the next morning. Not because I knew what I wanted to do, but because Priscilla is the kind of person you call when the world feels like it's been tilted sideways. She'd been my attorney through the sale, but I'd known her for years before that. We were in the same civic organization back in the early 2000s, one of those neighborhood improvement committees that accomplished almost nothing but introduced me to some genuinely good people. I told her what I'd seen. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Don't do anything yet. Don't confront, don't move money, don't say a word. Come see me Friday." I did exactly that. In her office, with the door closed and a box of tissues on the coffee table that I was determined not to need, Priscilla walked me through the landscape of what I was dealing with. Ohio is an equitable distribution state. The business sale proceeds, since Hartwell predated our marriage by 11 years, were largely my separate property, provided I hadn't commingled funds in certain ways over the years. Priscilla had actually built some protective language into the sale itself, almost prophylactically, because she's careful like that. "You're in a better position than most," she said, "but you need to document everything before he knows you know." I asked her how long it had been going on. She looked at me like that was a question for a different kind of professional. I hired a different kind of professional 2 weeks later, a private investigator out of Cincinnati, a quiet, unremarkable man in his 50s named Walt, who sent me a secure portal login and told me he'd have preliminary findings within 30 days. He had them in 18, 4.5 years. I read that in a report sitting in my car outside a Panera Bread, and I set the iPad down on the passenger seat and I looked at the windshield for a while. 4.5 years. Our granddaughter's birth. My knee surgery. The pandemic. All those months we'd been stuck in the house together. All those meals, all those evenings, all that proximity. And he'd been in it the entire time. The woman was 44 years old. She worked in his company's accounting department. Her name was in the report, and I'm not going to say it here because she doesn't deserve any more space in this story than she's already taken up. I made a decision sitting in that parking lot. I decided I was not going to be foolish about this. Here is what I mean by that. I had built something for 41 years through careful, disciplined decision-making. I had learned, the hard way, multiple times that acting on emotion alone is how you end up in situations you regret. You don't fire an employee in the heat of the moment. You document, you consult, you follow proper process, and then you act. I was going to treat this the same way. For the next 6 weeks, I was the best version of my married self. I made his coffee. I asked about his trips. I laughed at his golf stories. I sat across from him at dinner, and I was, to all appearances, completely fine. Inside, I was organizing. Priscilla helped me establish a separate financial account, completely clean, completely legal, just my funds from the sale kept clearly distinct. We cataloged documentation. We put together a timeline. We were ready before I said a single word. The conversation happened on a Sunday morning in April. He was at the kitchen table with his newspaper. He still gets the actual paper, always has, and I sat down across from him with my coffee and I said his name. The way I said it, he looked up. I said, I know about her. I've known for 2 months. I have documentation going back 4 years. I've spoken with an attorney. I want a divorce. He stared at me. He opened his mouth. He closed it. And then? And this is the part I was not prepared for, even after all my preparation. He started crying. Not the crying of a man who is sorry. The crying of a man who is scared. There's a difference, and I knew it instantly. He said he didn't want to lose me. He said it was a mistake. It was over. It had meant nothing. He used every word in the script of men who have been caught, and I sat there and I listened to all of it without interrupting because I had promised myself I would be calm, and I was. When he stopped, I said, I've already made my decision. I just wanted you to hear it from me directly. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, What about the money? From the sale. There it was. I had wondered when that would surface. I had actually wondered late at night whether I was wrong about him, whether maybe this was all a terrible mistake and he was genuinely broken up about what he'd done. The tears had almost gotten to me. But that question, what about the money, answered everything I needed to know. I said, That's between me and my attorney. The divorce took 14 months. I won't pretend it wasn't brutal. It was. His attorney was aggressive and creative in ways that Priscilla had warned me to expect. He claimed involvement in the business that wasn't there. He argued that certain decisions we'd made as a couple had contributed to the company's success. He produced emails, old, innocent emails where I'd mentioned the business in passing at home, and tried to build a narrative out of them. Priscilla was better. Because I had started the business 11 years before we married, because I had kept scrupulous separate records, because Priscilla had structured the sale with careful documentation of asset origin, and because Ohio law was on my side, the vast majority of the sale proceeds were determined to be my separate property. He was entitled to a portion of certain marital assets accumulated during our marriage, which was fair, and I accepted that without objection. He did not get the $6.8 million. He got significantly less than he expected, and I will say this, watching him realize that in the mediator's office was one of the stranger experiences of my life. Not satisfying exactly. Not triumphant. Just clarifying. Like the last bit of fog burning off a cold morning. We sold the house, split that down the middle, which was fine. I never loved that house anyway. He went to stay with his brother in Cleveland. I rented an apartment on the east side of Dayton, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor with big windows. And for the first time in decades, I could put things wherever I wanted and nobody would move them. My daughter. We have 2 daughters and a son. She flew in from Portland the week I moved. She'd known about the affair for a few months by then, because eventually I had to tell the kids, and that conversation was its own kind of awful. But she showed up with a carload of supplies, and we spent 2 days putting together IKEA furniture and eating takeout on the floor. And it was one of the best weekends I'd had in years. My son didn't speak to his father for almost 8 months. My younger daughter struggled more. She kept hoping we'd reconcile, the way children do no matter what age they are. But they all got there eventually. Family does, mostly. I'm going to tell you about my Thursday evenings. After the divorce was finalized, Priscilla invited me to a dinner she hosts, a small group, mostly professional women in their 50s and 60s who get together once a month at someone's house. Rotating host. Good wine. Real conversation. I went the first time mostly because I had nothing else to do on a Thursday and my apartment was very quiet. I went back because of the conversation. These women had lived things. They'd navigated careers and marriages and losses and reinventions, and they didn't talk about any of it the way you talk about things when you need validation. They talked about it the way people talk when they've come out the other side and they're genuinely interested in what comes next. There was a man at the third dinner I attended. He was the husband of one of the women, there briefly at the start before heading out to give us the space. He was soft-spoken, made good pasta sauce, asked me genuine questions about home health care, not politely, actually curious. We talked in the kitchen for about 20 minutes before he left. The hostess caught my eye afterward and raised an eyebrow. I told her to stop. She did not stop. His name is Frank. He's 66, a retired civil engineer who consults part-time. He was widowed 3 years ago after a long marriage, genuinely long and genuinely happy, which was something I noticed about him, the way he spoke about his late wife without performing the grief but also without dismissing it, like it was a real thing that had happened to him, part of him, and he'd made peace with it. We got coffee the following week, then dinner a few weeks after that. Slow, careful, the way you do things when you're 63 and you've learned some things about yourself. I'm not going to over-describe this part. It's new and it's mine and I want to keep it that way for a while, but I will say there is something about being known, really known. About sitting across from someone who asks you questions because they actually want the answers, who listens the way a person listens when they're not waiting for their turn to talk, who, when I told him about Hartwell and the 41 years and the pearl earrings and all of it, looked at me for a moment and then said, "Your mother would have been proud of you." I hadn't expected that. I had to look out the window for a second. People ask me sometimes, friends, my daughters, women who've been through similar things, whether I regret telling my husband about the sale, whether I wish I'd kept that to myself. Yes, obviously yes. That was a mistake. And I knew it within about 20 minutes of his reaction at the dinner table that night. I told him because I was 63 years old and I'd spent my whole life building something and I wanted to share it with my husband. I thought that was what you did. I thought 32 years meant something. But here's what I've learned about regret. It's a useful tool when it teaches you something, and a destructive one when you just live in it. So yes, I regret that conversation. I used it to learn something about myself, that I was still extending trust to someone who had long since stopped earning it. And then I put the regret down. What I don't regret, the 41 years. Not a single one. Not the 3 a.m. payroll panic, not the 2009 lawsuit, not the Saturdays I spent on the phone instead of anywhere else. Every one of those years built something real. Built me into someone who, when everything fell apart, knew how to put herself back together. I also don't regret being calm when I could have been explosive. Lord knows I felt explosive. But I learned enough by 63 to know that calm is a choice, and it's almost always the right one. I've been thinking lately about what I want the next chapter to look like. Priscilla thinks I should consider some kind of advisory role. Working with women building care-related businesses, sharing what I know. My daughter in Portland keeps sending me links to places on the Oregon coast that she says I need to see before I die, which is her way of asking me to visit more often. Frank and I have talked about taking a trip somewhere neither of us has been. Somewhere we choose together with no history attached. I don't know what comes next. I didn't know what was coming at 30 or 40 or when I was sitting outside that Panera Bread in my car in February, reading a report that changed everything I thought I knew. But I wore my mother's pearl earrings the day I signed those papers, and I'm still here. And the mornings are mine now, all of them, quiet and entirely my own. That is not nothing, that is actually everything. I've thought a lot about what made the difference. Not the attorney, not the paperwork, not even the sale itself. What made the difference was that by the time everything fell apart, I had already become someone who knew how to hold herself together. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because of 41 years of showing up. 41 years of making hard calls, owning mistakes, learning what I didn't know, and doing the work anyway. Every time I chose discipline over impulse, every time I sat with a difficult problem instead of reacting to it, I was building something that had nothing to do with Hartwell. I was building the person I'd need to be for exactly this moment. That's the thing nobody tells you when you're young and building your life. You think you're building a business, or a marriage, or a career. But underneath all of it, you're building yourself. And the quality of that work is what determines what you have left when everything else is stripped away. My husband made choices over 4.5 years. I don't know exactly what he told himself to justify them, that things were complicated, that he deserved something, that I was too focused on work to notice, whatever the story was. But every one of those choices cost him something he couldn't see at the time, not just the marriage, his own integrity, his children's respect, the version of himself he could have been. That's not punishment from the outside, that's just consequence. The life you build in secret becomes the life you have to live with. And I made choices too. The choice to stay calm when I could have screamed. The choice to call Priscilla before I called him out. The choice to document and wait, and be smart instead of just being right. Those choices cost me something too. 6 weeks of sitting across from someone I no longer recognized, pretending everything was fine. That was genuinely hard. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But those choices protected me in ways I didn't fully understand until the mediator's office, when his attorney's arguments fell apart one by one against the record Priscilla and I had quietly built. Intelligence isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about knowing what you don't know and finding the people who do. It's about slowing down when everything in you wants to run. Priscilla knew family law. Walt knew investigation. I knew my own business and my own finances. Together we were more than enough. And here's what I want to say to anyone who is sitting somewhere right now with something heavy. A discovery, a betrayal, a life that looks completely different than it did 6 months ago. The ground can shift and you can still be standing. Not because you're exceptional, because you've been building yourself all along, even when you didn't know that was what you were doing. Every hard year you survived, every time you chose to keep going instead of giving up, that was practice, that was preparation. I wore my mother's pearl earrings the day I signed the sale papers. She never got to see what I built. But I think she would have understood it. She was a practical woman who believed that how you handle things matters more than what happens to you. I've carried that my whole life without always knowing it. The mornings are mine now. Quiet, entirely my own. That took 63 years and one very hard year to earn. It was worth it.